Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bellarmine Chapel. My name's Tim Severin. I'm the social mission director for the chapel and just welcoming everyone to the space. We were approached by Journey of Hope about hosting this maybe 2 months ago, and we jumped on the opportunity. It's been something that's been dear to our community for a long time, and that Pope Francis recently reiterated as significant for Catholics to be involved in. He said, no matter how serious the crime that has been committed, the death penalty is inadmissible because it is an attack on the inviolability and the dignity of the person. So it's really this dignity that we hope shines through tonight, and we're really happy to welcome members of our community who have been deeply impacted by the death penalty to share their stories with us. Before we get to the program, 2 quick logistics. If anyone finds when they go out to their car that there is a parking ticket on it, send it to us. We've asked them not to ticket, but there's so many lots that it's hard to cover all of them. So if you get one, we will cover it. And then the second is just that afterwards we will have some refreshments, so stick around for that, please, and you can talk to our speaker some more. So now I'll welcome up Bob Gross from the Journey of Hope. Thank you.
It's good to be with you this evening. I'm glad you're here. We have 3 people who are going to speak this evening, and each of them has a very personal story of experience in relation to the death penalty. And each of those experiences is different, and each of them has been very impactful. Then we will also have time for your questions and your comments, and so we will make time for that and look forward to hearing from you. The first person to speak is Terry Steinberg, and she will give you a story of what has happened in her family.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening. I want to thank you all for allowing us to come out here and share our stories. We represent the collateral damage of the death penalty. The death penalty is not normal dinner conversation. It's not something I like to talk about at parties, but we are executing our citizens in this country, and I think we need to do something about it. And the best way I know how to help in that manner is to let you take a walk in my shoes for a few minutes. It's what it's like to be touched by the death penalty. I went to Catholic school, 8th grade, went on to Catholic high school, put my kids in Catholic school, and during my time in the Catholic school system, and with very good Catholic parents, I learned that all life is sacred. I learned that that thou shalt not kill. I learned to forgive and turn the other cheek. And nowhere I also learned that love thy neighbor as yourself, love God and love thy neighbor. These were 2 of God's greatest commandments, and I didn't see any footnotes or exceptions in that commandment. So I didn't really give the death penalty much thought until one day when it came into my home and threatened the life of my oldest child and destroyed the childhood and the rest of our lives forever. My son Justin was 2 days before his 20th birthday when a young man named Owen Barber shot and killed another young man named Danny Petroli. Danny was arrested out in California and flown back from California to Virginia in order to face the consequences of his actions. During the flight, the detective that picked him up actually told Owen, and he wrote it in his notes, a note that was kept hidden for us for many years. But he wrote in his note that he had told Owen Barber that in order to keep himself from getting sentenced to death for the crime that he had committed, he was to blame it on my son. So on May 1st, 2001, just a few weeks after the crime had transpired, I was getting ready to take my youngest child to the playground, and I got a phone call from Justin, and he said, "Mom, I'm going to turn myself in. They think I had something to do with Danny's death, and I need to clear my name." He says, "But it's my first offense. I should be home in just a few days. Please don't worry." It wasn't long before the case spiraled out of control, and in January of 2002, after 3 weeks of trial and testimony, my son got sentenced to 3 years for a gun he never touched, 30 years for selling marijuana, his first offense, and death for a crime he didn't commit, murder for hire. He went off to death row in 2002, in July of 2002, and just 2 days after he had gone off to death row, I learned about a group of people protesting the death penalty on the front of the Supreme Court steps. I was in shock. I was scared to death. I didn't know what I could do to save my son. And I'm not really good at driving in DC, and parking is usually hard to find, but somehow by the grace of God, not only did I find a parking place, but I found these people. And I ran up to them carrying this picture of my son, saying, "They want to kill my son. Does he look like a monster to you? Please help me." And they embraced me and took me and his family. And a few months later, Bill called me, and I don't even know if I would have remembered what he looked like at that time, but he called me up and he said, "I want you to go with us to Ohio in 2003, and I want you to go and tell your story." And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know these people. And I said, "Well, where will I stay?" And he says, "We'll take care of everything. You just got to come and work with us, sleep with us, eat with us, whatever." I said, "I'm going to call you back in a few minutes." And so I went downstairs and was talking to my husband, and I said, "They want me to go to Ohio and talk about what has happened to us." And he says, "Well, you don't even know these people." I said, "I know, but I have to do everything I possibly can to save his life, and maybe this is what it is." And it was actually one of the best things I ever did. I learned about that love and compassion is the answer, that forgiveness is the way to heal when something terrible happens to you, and that when you have something, when you have a hole ripped in your heart, you can either fill it with love and compassion or you can fill it with hatred, and the hatred does nothing but burden you and wear you down and keep you from doing good things. And so I was blessed to be able to put some purpose to my pain and go out and tell my son's story. And I hope that by telling his story, I can let young people know that what they do not only affects themselves, but it affects their families, and hope that they will go out from thenceforward and make good choices. I hope to open people's mind and change hearts about the death penalty in the hopes that, we can get rid of it. We can save lives. My children, I have 4 kids. The oldest was, Justin was almost 20. Wes was he was 18. Trying to make those college decisions. I see some college students here in the audience. I'm sure you remember how difficult that senior year is when you're trying to make decisions for the rest of your life. Imagine what it would be like to make those decisions while the state that you live in is threatening the life of your brother, the brother you played basketball with in the backyard who taught you how to throw a ball. He tried to go to college, but I found him sitting in the living room one day when he should have been in class, and I said, "Aren't you supposed to be in class?" And he said, "Mom, I can't do it." My daughter, Christina, she was 15, freshman in high school, captain of the cheerleading squad. But it was kind of hard to walk down those halls with a smile on your face, knowing that everybody was talking about you behind your back. Lindsay was just 4. How do you tell a 4-year-old about the death penalty? How do you tell a little girl that the brother she loves, whose lap she sat on to watch Disney movies, was going to be locked in a box and rendered helpless, and then one day walk down the hall, strapped to a gurney, and pumped with poison until he was dead? And they were going to do this on purpose. And there was nothing that your mom can do to stop it. We knew it was a mistake. We knew that it was a lie. So we didn't tell her. We had every hope that he would be coming home really soon. But unfortunately, the system is much more broken than I ever realized. Thankfully, in 2005, Owen admitted that he lied in court, that Justin had nothing to do with this murder, and he tried to get it fixed, but the prosecution did not want to hear that. And it took until 2010 for him to get a hearing in the federal court. During that hearing, the prosecutor actually admitted on the stand that not only had he put witnesses in the same room together prior to testimony so that they could get their story straight, he admitted to withholding evidence. The Innocence Project had taken over my son's case and had found that note from the detective that arrested him that said, "You need to put this on Justin Wolf or you're going to be sentenced to death." The judge was furious, and it took a little while, but finally in 2012, he ordered my son to either be released or retried. They sent him back to Manassas, where the crime had been committed and where he was originally charged. The prosecutor was not very happy, and the very next day, he and that detective and his assistant went down to meet with Owen Barber in his jail cell and tell him that if he didn't go back to his original story, blaming my son, that he was going to face the death sentence. They were going to pull his plea deal and send him to death row. But Owen refused. They'd actually put a tape recorder in their pocket and tape recorded the whole conversation, and Owen kept saying, I can't do that. He said, the only thing you can get Justin on is the drugs, the marijuana. So 2 weeks later, they piled on 6 new charges. 2 more were death eligible, 4 were life eligible. And so Justin sat in the cell waiting for his retrial in 120 days, 3.5 years later, after 5,000 days of solitary confinement. Think about that for a minute. 5,000 days in a room no bigger than your bathroom, not able to touch your family. I hadn't hugged my son in 11 years. His brother had had 3 children. Justin hadn't held one of them. And he was afraid of going back to death row. He had already watched 18 of his friends be marched off to their death, and there was nothing he could do about it. And he didn't want to go back there. He was afraid. He also felt himself slipping away mentally because of the solitary confinement. How he made it 5,000 days, I don't know. Grace of God is the only way. But so he took a plea deal. 15 years, he never changed his story, and he professed his innocence, and nobody believed him. But the day they sold him that plea deal, and he said he was guilty, they believed him. And unfortunately, they resentenced him and is making him serve another 20 years for a crime he didn't commit. We are still fighting, and we are so blessed. We have had some incredible attorneys, and I've met some incredible people along the way. But it is a pain that my family should have never had to suffer. It's a pain the other family shouldn't have had to suffer. When Owen was walked out those doors and into his jail sentence of 32 years, they were able to put that, close that door and know that Owen was serving the sentence that he was given. My son was sentenced to death, and for 13 years, that family waited for my son's punishment. And now that punishment will never be. He will spend most of his life in a jail cell, but that's not what the family was told was going to be the punishment that he deserved. So I think it hurts both families. We've had, like I said, we've had so many great lawyers, and I know that every one of them has fought so hard to save his life and bring him home. One of the lawyers actually quit practicing law and is now a teacher because she couldn't handle what she had witnessed in the legal system. And I know so many others don't have the luck that my son has had. I know that God has a plan for my family and for Justin, and I know that he has done some really good things while in those 4 walls. I just pray that this is not God's final answer for my son. I pray that one day I get to bring him home. Shortly after my son's case was vacated and sent back for the rehearing, there was a young man who was my son's same age, and it was time for his execution. We had gotten 3 execution dates. So I knew how hard those dates were, and I went down to stand outside the prison where Terrell was going to be executed. And I stood out there on the field, holding hands with his brother and his mother, and knowing that I couldn't do anything to stop what they were going to do to her son. And yet my son had another chance. We were lucky. So I hope that our story can make a difference in somebody else's life. I know Justin's made a difference in a lot of men who have been on the row. And I hope that the people that I've spoken to who have heard his story can take that home and it can make a difference in their lives. And I hope that one day soon we can put an end to this horrible punishment that we call the death penalty. So I ask you to join us in this fight to end the death penalty. Talk about it. I know it's not a great conversation to have, but we need to do better. Jesus taught us better. He came down to show us that love is the answer. And I don't think there's anything loving in the death penalty. I'm going to ask you to keep the judges in prayer. We've had our case up in the front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has sent it back to Virginia to be relooked at for the vindictive prosecution that my son endured. And we're hoping to get the system, get his sentence changed and get to bring him home. So I ask you to keep them in your prayers, and I ask you to keep my family in your prayers. And I ask that you share my story with young people and help them to realize that, you know, it doesn't take much for your life to be forever altered. I was just your regular mom. I drove a minivan, and now my life will never be the same. So thank you very much for letting me share my story, and God bless you.
Thank you, Terry. One of the things, if you are folks who know something about how the death penalty works, you may recognize the term death-qualified jury. That in a case where the death penalty is in the prosecutor's plan, a part of jury selection is to ask every prospective juror, could you vote for the death penalty? So it excludes many of us in this room, which already means that a jury of your peers is being selected for only those who would be willing to vote for the death. So what that means is prosecutors sometimes seek the death penalty to get a death-qualified jury, knowing that jury is more likely to convict, even if they eventually will accept a lesser sentence. They know that that jury is more likely to convict. And just now I'm thinking about that term for us all as a society that is willing to kill those who have been already locked in a cell. If we're willing to do that in the name of our state or our country, we have become a death-qualified society. I want to let you hear now from Suzanne Bossler, whose experience with the death penalty is tragic as well, and from a different part of the picture.
Good evening. Good evening. I've been working with these three people for quite some time, and I've heard Terry's story many times, but I still get emotional because it's a very intense story that she has told, and what we're going to hear from Derek. I'm going to start off by, as you know, I'm Suzanne Bossler from South Florida, and I like to start off with this little bumper sticker that says, "Who would Jesus execute. Or on the other hand, what we've mostly heard is, what would Jesus do? I'm going to also start this off by, actually reminds me of our work in Journey of Hope since we started in 1993. And I was reading this the other day, and a couple days ago, Derek and I spoke in Texas at Christian Community Development Association, and they had this scripture that to me went very well with Journey of Hope. And it's Isaiah 43:19 that says, "I'm about to do something new. It is beginning to happen even now. Don't you see it coming? I'm going to make a way for you to go through the desert. I will make streams of water in the dry and empty land." And how do I perceive that? As us getting our stories, information about the death penalty, facts about forgiveness and healing. And I continue that in saying 42:7, "To open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prisons, and to release from the dungeon who sit in darkness." And that always reminds me of people like my friend Derek that are in prison and death row, that especially if they're innocent, we consider ourselves their voice. On December 22nd, 1986, we had an interesting experience happen 3 days before Christmas. I lived in Opelika. My father was Reverend Bill Bossler with a Church of the Brethren, which is known for the Peace Church or a Sisterhood of Amish and Mennonite. And he took this job not being afraid, knowing that it was a bad area, but he was excited to be there to help and do what he could for that area and the people that were in it. We had people coming to us for food, clothing, help, counseling, you name it. We had everybody coming all the time. We had people coming regularly, and we, of course, always had somebody new. And on this day, it was definitely a new person. I was listening after I heard the doorbell ring, seeing if I could recognize the voice, and by the time my dad opened the door, I heard him make these strange noises. And I thought that sounded weird, so I go running out to the hallway, and I'm looking down the hallway, and he's holding onto the kitchen doorway, being stabbed with a knife by this man many times, over and over and over and over and over and over again. He collapsed on the floor. The man turned around because I went towards to help, and he stabbed me 3 times in the back, and I went down. He turned quickly around and did this all over to my father again and again and again and again and again. My dad collapsed. I tried to get up to help. And by that time, the man had put his hand on my shoulder, and I was backing into the living room. He was right here with the knife. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my father crawl to the front door. See the knife come to my face, so I turned it quickly, and it embedded in here twice, and I went down on the floor. And I still can't explain it to this day, how I was able to pretend I was dead by holding my breath, because I could hear him above me, breathing hard of all that work that he had just done, watching to see if I was alive, if he had to stab me more times so I would not be a witness. I must have convinced him that I was dead, so first time I heard him go open my bedroom door in the back, I opened my eyes. It was hard to open my eyes because there was like a river of blood coming across, and I could see my dad underneath the sofa, and he was having a really hard time breathing. And so I'm going, oh, please hurry and get out of here. It took quite some time, more than it should have. And finally, the man left. I went to my first duty, which was to go to 911. And I wanted to hear them say the 5 words, "Help is on the way," so that I could go back to my father. And if my father was going to die, I wanted to hold him in my arms so that he would not die on that cold terrazzo floor by himself. After the first cop got there, I blacked out, and periodically after that, I woke up several times throughout, and all I did was ask about, is my father alive? Is my father alive? I had no care about myself, because I knew if I was going to die, I was going to heaven, but I could tell that that place still needed my father. They had to take this whole side out of my head and parts of my brain, and my family came, and the whole week they had to try to answer my question, is my dad alive, is my dad alive? A week to the day later, James Bernard Campbell was caught, that killed my father. My dad was stabbed 24 times, I was stabbed 5. And my mom told me that my father was not alive anymore, and I consider that the day of my life that was pretty much the worst. Because I basically had stayed alive wanting to hear the words that he was alive. But things don't always go our way. After that, I had to think of more than, is he alive? I had to ask myself the question, Suzanne, are you going to be able to forgive him? I worked with like Bob and Journey of Hope and many other organizations from that time on to go around the world to share my story and things I learned about the death penalty, forgiveness and healing. And me as a PK, you know what a PK is? What's a PK? Preacher's kid. I'm a PK. And being a PK, I thought I was supposed to know what forgiveness was, what the definition was, and know how to do it. But it was a big challenge for me that I needed to learn. It wasn't like an easy forgiveness. And so all those times, with hundreds of times I went speaking around the world, I would always say the words, I forgive. But I would go home wondering why I was still angry, why I was still bitter, why I still even wanted to hurt this man myself. I dreamed about taking him into a room and punching his teeth out. I mean, I didn't know how to deal with it. I never felt like that before. So it took me 5.5 years to not just say the words. But here's, in addition to that, it took 10.5 years in the court system for me to get something besides what he was given. And he was given at first guilty. In the first sentencing, he was given the death penalty, even though they knew. Me and my family did not want the death penalty. I thought that I was going to be respected by the government and the court system, that would listen to me, because I thought a victim would be very important. My opinion would be very important. And here it comes out where they treated me like an enemy eventually. He was given the death penalty again. It went to the Supreme Court, came back for the second time, and finally I said, well, they're not respecting me and my opinion about life, not death. I had to hire my own lawyer to protect my victims' rights, and she had to teach me, she was able to teach me some things that I could do or say in the courtroom that I wanted the jurors to hear. On June 13th, 1997 was a day of victory for me, but I'm going to go back a little bit because 8 years before this happened, my father and I had a debate about the death penalty. And I asked him I knew his religious ways, why he was against it, but I learned about the deterrence and the cost and arbitrariness and capriciousness and things like that. And finally he said, Suzanne, let me just keep it simple for you. I will never forget what he said. He said, Suzanne, if anyone were ever to murder or kill me, I would still not want that person to get the death penalty. So for the first 5.5 years, even though I just said the words, I forgive, I did it. I tried to save his life for my father. I did it for my father first. Of course, God, but my dad first. And then after I was up on a stand and I pointed to James, I said, James, I forgive you whether you accept it or not. I forgive you. And it was after that moment I had no need for him to say, I'm sorry for what I did, or thank you for saving my life. I did not even need him to accept my forgiveness, because I learned, Suzanne, this 24-year-old that went through this experience, learned that forgiveness was not for him, it was for me. For me. I mean, I said if I was going to forgive him, would that take away my right to cry and miss him? Would it make me forget him? Would it dishonor him? But it was quite the opposite. I thought if I was going to help the government kill him, accessible to his murder, his execution, then I would be just like him. I would be a murderer too. And I don't think that's right to do. I have no right to take a human life, but I also have no right to help the government, give them a date, a time, exactly when they're going to die. I figured out that if if we're not going to give them the chance to be better people, how are they going to be better people? Also, before all of this learning experience that I had in losing my father, I learned that people in death row and in prisons aren't just a number. They've got a name. A mother and father created them. They're one of God's children. They bleed the same color blood that I bleed. Their soul is the same color as mine too. They have a soul just like me. So I have no right to take a life. The only response my mother would say when she was, a lot of reporters were coming around us was, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." This is my father, Bill Bossler. He was a man that would do anything for anybody, give the coat off his back, go anywhere that was needed. He would wear his collar into bars and talk with them and learn about them. He would go to the streets. He went everywhere. He was not afraid. I was also blessed at one point in time when I was with some of our people that were in South Carolina for the 1001st execution. And here's this man that I was able to talk to on the phone an hour and 20 minutes before it happened, Shawn Humphries. I had the blessing of talking to him before he passed away. It was the most amazing experience of my life. After he was executed, his lawyer came to me and gave me a note that he had written to me that was so sacred. If I was going to help the government kill James Bernard Campbell, that would not dignify my father's name. My father doesn't deserve that. I'm going to just read something really quick here. Respect for life. Catholic teaching on human life is rooted in the belief that all life is a gift from God that must be respected and defended from conception to natural death. Yes, some of us are against the death penalty, but as Terry mentioned, don't be afraid to talk about it. Put a bumper sticker on your car, sign a petition, add your name to our list that Bob will share with you. We got to get the information out there so that everybody understands, because like she mentioned also, is that I came into this without wanting to, and it could happen to anybody. My father had a favorite hymn that you all might know about, which is, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." But I always add to that, it's going to begin with all of us. The world changed. Thank you.
One of the things, as I have accompanied my friends who are part of the Journey of Hope, it's a difficult thing in our society. Maybe it's getting a little bit easier to talk about opposition to the death penalty. I've been in that work for a long time. And it's unpopular sometimes in some circles to talk about that, but we take that on. It's a whole different thing if your witness about the value of life and against the taking of life involves telling about the most difficult, painful experiences of your life. And I give honor and respect and appreciation to each of these speakers and others who are speaking around Ohio this week, who are willing to touch those painful parts of themselves, to lift up what we can be and the goodness that is in us. Our third speaker is Derek Jamison, and he will give you another perspective on what the death penalty does to us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, my name is Derek Wayne Jamison. I'm the 119th Death Row exoneree. I was born and raised right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up in Cincinnati with two older brothers and sisters, and two older brothers and sisters, and my mom and my dad, and I had such an amazing time growing up in Cincinnati. I got some amazing memories about growing up downtown Cincinnati, you know. But on August the 1st, 1984, in Cincinnati, Ohio, downtown Cincinnati, Ohio, at a nightclub, a bar called the Central Cafe. Early in the daytime, about 12 o'clock in the evening, two young men entered this establishment. And the owner's son was in the establishment, and somebody else probably was in the back. These two young men attacked the owner's son. His name was Gary Mitchell. And Gary died like 8 days later after he was attacked by these two perpetrators. A lot of people seen what happened. It was a bunch of witnesses because it was in the daytime, you know. When these two guys was leaving the cafe, two ladies was coming in the establishment, and one of the guys was 5'1", one was 5'3". I ain't never been 5 foot nothing, that's a good job. So, but in October of 1985, the worst thing could happen to a human being happened to me and my family. I was charged in a Hamilton County courtroom in front of Judge Thomas H. Crush. Remember that name, Thomas H. Crush? Sentenced me to die for this homicide and armed robbery of this nightclub. Man, it was one of the worst days of my life, hearing that judge, the words come up out of your mouth. Mr. Jamison, you are sentenced to die in the Ohio electric chair. You hear that? I didn't know nothing about this case. I didn't have nothing to do with this case, and I was being sentenced to die for this crime. And it was horrible, and it was horrible watching my family scream and everybody just going crazy. But I knew that when that judge sentenced me to die, I knew the effect it was going to have on my family. I knew it was going to destroy my family, you know, because I knew how close we was. But I was sentenced to die. It was October the 25th, and I arrived at Lucasville Prison here in Ohio. And I remember arriving at Lucasville. They shut down this maximum security prison, and they brought out the welcome party. All these guards, white shirts and gray shirts, met me at the front gate, and they marched me down this long corridor. It seemed like this was so long because I was shackled from head to toe, and they walked me down this long corridor. And when we got to the death house, they walked me into the death house, and the first thing I saw up in the corner behind this bulletproof plexiglass was old Sparky, the electric chair. And believe me, over 400 and some men, women, and children had been executed in this chair, you know? And all I could do was look up at this chair. It was like watching a monster in a cage, you know? I've been just been sentenced to die, and that's what's gonna kill me, that electric chair. These guards continue to interview me and take all my clothes and all my belongings. I'm standing here with no clothes on. They got men and women guards standing there, but I didn't care about that. The only thing I could think about was that chair. And they dressed me, and all these guards marched me up out of the death house, and we marched down this hallway, and we got to death row. And from death row, you could hear all the inmates in there making all this noise. You could hear people listening to rap music, country music, trying to talk over one another. But when that guard opened that door and said, "The new guy is here," and one of them had the nerve to say, "Dead man walking," it got real quiet. And I could hear one of the guys say, "Derek Jamison here, the new guy is here. The new guy is here." So the guards told the other guards that was bringing me to death row, they say, "Mr. Jamison is going to cell 27 on the second floor." And I remember these guards lifted me up and carried me up these steps to the second floor. But that wasn't the horror. The horror was watching all these young men as I walked down this range. They had their arms hanging out their door, out the bars. They had already been condemned to die. And I had to walk all the way down this long range to cell 27, so I had to walk past a lot of people. And I remember saying, "Oh, so y'all killing kids now?" And the guards were like, "Move the hell on, get on down the range." So they put me in cell 27. And when that door slammed behind me and they took them handcuffs off of me, I could barely move in this cell. I'm so big and tall, you know, 6'12", and I'm 6'5", 50 pounds, you know, big dude. You know, I could barely maneuver in that cell, bumping into stuff, you know. But I sat in that cell for 14 long years. 14 long years before they carried out the execution. 14 long years we went without one of my friends or neighbors getting executed. But in 1999, a young man from Texas, his name was Wilford Berry. He's known around the country and around the death penalty movement as the volunteer, because he was the first person to volunteer to be executed. And he was the first person to volunteer to be executed in Ohio. And Ohio hadn't had an execution since 1963. And it was 1999, 14 years after I'd been sentenced to die. He volunteered to die and be executed. Barry was a troubled young man, you know. He went through hell and back. All the inmates and all the guards hated him, because didn't nobody want to see the execution start. Didn't nobody want to see an execution. And the guys on death row, they were really offended by that. And they attacked Barry and did all kind of stuff to him. And that really made him want to die. He tried to take his life a couple times, but failed. But Barry wanted to be executed. And I remember that morning like it was yesterday. It was all over the news. I was on death row. I was laying in my bed. Excuse me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The doom squad, the death squad, what they call those guys that come to get you to take you to the death house. They were walking behind this little bitty guy, little bitty white guy from Texas. He wasn't even from Ohio. He was from Texas. Didn't have no friends, nobody. Everybody hated him. I was the only person who really showed him some love. but they marched him in the death house. And I remember all the guards walking in the death house with him. It's all on the news, cameras everywhere, people everywhere. I remember they walked him in that death house, but the thing mostly, after they had executed Barry, after they had killed this young man, I remember the paramedics bringing his body out to that hearse. And that was one of the most horrible feelings in the world. They had executed him, they had him in the body bag, and they were pulling him on the gurney out to the hearse. And his body, you could see his body moving in the bag, because they were trying to hurry up and get him out of there. But that was the first execution in Ohio. And like in Ohio, after Barry was executed in 1999, it was like this dark cloud came across the state of Ohio. They started killing my friends one after another. Them young guys that I told you about when I walked up death row, I watched them grow up to be healthy young men and taken out of their cells and murdered, executed, In the state of Ohio, we didn't have 56 executions. 56. All them young men. I mean, if it was 56 coffins in here, you'd be scared to come in this chapel. You know what I'm saying? But since 1999, they done carried out 56 executions in Ohio. And the day was October 25th, 1985, when I got sentenced to die. Exactly 20 years later, October 25th, 2005, the worst day of my life became the best day of my life. Because October 25th of 2005, I walked off of death row a free man. But the day I was leaving, October 25th, coming up, I'll be celebrating my 15th anniversary of freedom. The day I was leaving death row, a young man by the name of William Williams was being prepared for his execution that morning. My best friend. Wow, it was so hard. I'm going home. I'm walking up out of prison, a free man, and they was executing Lil Flip. We called him Lil Flip. He was from Youngstown. He was murdered that day. He was executed that day. But since I've been off of death row, I've been doing amazing work, this abolition work all over the world. I've been speaking out against the death penalty all over the world. And I'm going to continue to do this because killing people is wrong. It's wrong, Our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, was executed at the age of 33. So why are we still executing human beings in America? We're making too many mistakes. Over 1,505 human beings have been executed in the United States since 1977, when a young man by the name of Gary Gilmore volunteered to be executed in Utah by the Fire Squad. Since Gary Gilmore was executed, 1,504 people have been put to death, men and women, in America. We need to do something about this. We're making too many mistakes with the death penalty, first of all. We got 166 men and women that's been exonerated from a prison, off of death row in a prison in the United States. That's 166 reasons we need to end this madness. The death penalty, it ain't just cruel and unusual punishment. It's more than that. It's pure evil. To have the death penalty in the state you live in is living among pure evilness. It's wrong to kill people. It ain't no good way to kill people. And we are making mistakes. A lot of innocent people are dying. A lot of innocent people have been executed. not just Cameron Todd Willingham and the Carlos DeLuna and the Troy Davises. It's more, it's bigger than that. They just the recently ones killed, executed in the 2000s. But before that, they didn't kill mass innocent people. You know, we are making mistakes. And we got a thing called life without parole, or life, or even 30 years. We could use, with life without parole, you could go get this person and release them from the cell. But with the death penalty, you can't go release that man from the grave. And I'm gonna leave y'all with this. Out of all my friends that was executed in the state of Ohio, on their death certificate, it got homicide. That means state-sanctioned murder. What are we teaching our kids? And what are y'all letting teach our kids? That it's wrong to kill and then turn around and kill people? What is that, you know? That's a far cry from the truth. We need to do better, y'all. We need to wake up and show love and compassion for all human beings. You know, the worst day of my life, when I was on death row, it was one of the worst days. But really, I'm gonna tell you the truth, one of the worst days was in 1999. It was around Christmas time. I'll never forget this. I was sitting on my bed at death row, you know, enjoying the day as best as I can. And I was singing Christmas songs and, listening to Christmas music, sitting on my bed, just enjoying, making the best situation that I could out of being on death row. And I just happened to look up. And I see all these guards at my door. And the white shirts in front came to talk to me. But I see the guards in the back of them. And I know them. So they know me. And I could figure out why they cried. I could figure out why these guards are crying. But they came to tell me. Excuse me. They came to tell me that I was sitting on the bed waiting on a visit. They came to tell me that my mom had passed away that morning. And the only thing I could think about, my beautiful mom laid up in that morgue. So, see, the death penalty didn't kill me, but it destroyed my family. It killed my mom and my dad. I knew it took my mom and my dad from me, because I watched how they suffered. I watched my mom suffer so much while I was on death row. My mom was my biggest supporter. My mom was out here finding people to do that abolition work with her, to end this death penalty, to end this madness in Ohio. My mom was a true champion. That's why I got to do this. You know, I left off at death row a teacher. I'm teaching the world love and compassion. You know, people, priests and nuns, and ask me all over the world, why come you ain't angry? You know the reason I ain't angry? Because them guards in Lucasville prison, they was angry. And I would never want to act like that. You understand that? That's why I got so much love and kindness in my heart. And I'm going to continue that. I'm going to continue to show love and compassion to all human beings. All human beings are sacred. All human beings are sacred. And I'm going to leave y'all with that. God bless y'all. I love y'all. And thank y'all for being here and supporting me and my two best friends, Terry and Suzanne. I love y'all. God bless y'all. Thank you.
We look forward to hearing what you might like to hear more about. Terry and Suzanne and Derek will be glad to answer questions you have or hear the comments you have about what's on your heart regarding these things. So, and Tim is going to carry a microphone so that what you ask can be heard by all.
I'm interested in hearing what reaction you obtained from the children at the schools where you were speaking in Cincinnati.
We haven't been to any school. Did you guys go to any of the schools yet?
No, we haven't been in, but
Yeah, 'cause
Oh, I
it's-
thought you had two school.
Monday.
I thought you had two school visits scheduled.
It's Monday. They didn't have school today.
Oh,
It's Columbus Day.
that's right.
But in the past, when I've gone to schools, I had one little girl come up to me after my talk, and she says, "I don't mean to insult you, ma'am, but you look so normal." And I said, "I haven't seen normal in a really long time." And I had another kid come up and say, "You know, you could be my mom." And I said, "Yeah, I could." I said, "Please don't ever make your mom go through what my mom..." Justin's greatest pain is not being in that cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. His greatest pain is seeing what it's done to his family and seeing how it has destroyed the rest of us and how we've had to, suffer through this. I always knew, that if they decided to take the life of my son, that he'd be out of pain, but it would be the rest of us that would have to carry on and try and learn how to live after what we would have had to witness. And that's what's wrong. It's not about what the guilty person has done. It's about how we respond to it. We're all worth more than the worst thing we've ever done. And we can't control what people do to us. What we can control is how we respond to it and what we do with it going forward. Have you had other experience with kids?
Oh, yes, I have some of the most amazing kids, because we used to do this thing when I lived in New Orleans called Voices from Death Row, and we used to go out and speak to the high school and junior high school kids, and I'd be on a date on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and a kid would come up to me and be excited. Mom, this is Derek Jamison. And they get to tell them my story, and then people come gathered around us and stuff, and they be so excited, but they remember that. They remember what they heard in that auditorium. They remember that message I left them with, and they gonna remember that message the rest of their life, like y'all gonna remember it, And they want to know what they could do. The young people want to know how they could get out and help to stop this, because they know it's wrong, like y'all know it's wrong, like their parents know it's wrong. Killing people is wrong, It ain't no right way to kill people. Innocent or not innocent, it ain't no right way to kill people. We shouldn't be killing people. We got other methods to deal with people besides using murder, executions.
Just to extend on that question, I was actually sharing earlier today about a story that when I was in, I think it was South Dakota or Nebraska, they took me to an elementary 5th grade, which I was in shock because I haven't spoken to a 5th grade. And so I had to downsize details and try to, get on the level. I didn't know what was going on or how I should talk, I was nervous as wreck. But these children got a little bit of information from their teacher about me and death penalty. And after I spoke, she said that they have their school elementary newspaper, and they wanted to interview me for their newspaper. So we did the questions and things like that, and towards the end she said, "Okay, one more question." And there was a little girl that sat right here, and she was bowing her head, and it took her a couple seconds, but she lifted her head to me and said, "Suzanne, before I heard you, I was for the death penalty. I am now against the death penalty." So it taught me that down to 10-year-olds, we can talk about this. We don't have to tell them details, but it's good to get the information out there in their heads, the stories out there in their minds, and get them going to where it needs to be for life, not death. So, any other questions or comments?
Sorry.
I have a comment. I feel in two of your stories, one of them or two, what your names are, that it appeared that the prosecutor in both of your situations to a point withheld evidence that could have freed your sons. And yours was that you were a victim, but
Yeah,
And that's a problem. That's a problem here in Ohio. I don't know if prosecutors across the country are elected like they are here in Ohio. But there's one prosecutor I know in Portage County that's withholding evidence of a man who's on death row for 23 years. And it's gone all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court, but the prosecutor will not release the information because his integrity is on the line.
Right, and that did happen in our case. He's more worried about not being proven wrong than the fact that he put an innocent kid on death row. And you know, there's no other job in our country or anywhere where you can make a mistake that many times and not have to face any consequences for it. You know, whether our prosecutor did it intentionally or it was a mistake, whatever, he pays no consequences for what he's done. I mean, if we had, you know, the tire company had 1 tire out of 10 that went bad, they'd shut the place down until they got it right. We've got 1,500 people having been executed and 166 have been released. That's more than a 10% fault rate. So I think we need to try and do something different and fix the problem.
I don't know if term limits would solve some of the problems. These guys, you know, they find a permanent lifetime job as a prosecutor,
Right.
and they want to hold on to it. But if they had term limits, that carrot would be out there for them.
Right. Yeah, the guy who put my son on death row has been in office now 40-some years. Wow. He's put at least 18 people on death row. And in Virginia, we're a fast-killing state. The fact that my son was still alive at 9 years was a miracle, because normally you're dead between 7 to 10.
I have a little slide comment about in 1995 when the death sentence was reestablished. That was Governor Voinovich. And Governor Voinovich wanted to be known as the educational governor. But he stayed away from the fact that he was also the governor who reinstituted or started executions again.
In my case, there was a complicated prosecutorial thing that happened in there. It wasn't necessarily withholding evidence, but they played a game with me. And what happened exactly was, it's an interesting moment. I went through 10 and a half years of the court system. And in other words, when they were going for the death penalty, they were prolonging our healing process, number one. They were disrespecting our opinion. But here's the thing, is that I had never dealt with a prosecutor before, so it was new for me. So all this time when I told them I'm against, I want life. Okay, Suzanne, okay. And then when you go in the courtroom, he'd ask for the death penalty. I'm like, something's wrong with this. And he did it the second time it came back from the Supreme Court, prosecutorial error. The third time, that's when I had to hire my own lawyer because they were playing games with me. And in that courtroom, what happened was my lawyer, like I said, taught me some things I could do in there without allegedly getting arrested. But on the other hand, she didn't teach me everything, because right before I testified for the last time, the judge, before the jurors came in, they said, Suzanne, you're not allowed to say your opinion about the death penalty. I'm like, what? I'm a victim. I thought my opinion was, nothing I could do. He started asking me the same questions he asked me 3 times before. Suzanne, your name, your address. And finally he said, Suzanne, what's your occupation? And I told him the truth. I said, I'm a hairdresser and I work to abolish the death penalty. Although they didn't clap for me in there. What happened was they had a sidebar, they sent the jurors out, and the judge turned to me and said, Suzanne, if you say your opinion again in this court, we will put you in jail for 6 months and fine you. So it took me, I wasn't expecting that. They had me crying in tears because I'm like, here I'm a victim? They're sending me to jail? I was frightened in there. So anyway, after I hired my own lawyer, they used to have the social worker, bring us coffee or tissue. They wouldn't have anything to do with us. They would not let anybody touch us, be next to us, talk to us, even look at us. So they played a game. It went as far as to, if we went to the bathroom in our regular seats behind James, they would fill it with a law student. So we couldn't get our seats back. So it started to be a game. You know what? I played back. And on June 13th, 1997, they did not get what they wanted. And also, I got the jurors to recommend life, not death, for this judge's first execution. So, amen to that one.
Amen.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here, y'all.
Well, I think you answered my question, because I was going to ask you what has your respective state done to help you, and what can we do here in Ohio to help get the word out?
Well, there's a lot of, Bob can help with that, but think about all the money that you spend on a death penalty trial. And that is a lot of money that could be spent on other things, like programs for the murder victim family members. Ohioans to Stop Executions would be a way. Sign up, they'll give you any information you want. Death Penalty Action, they can give you different ideas on what you can do here in Ohio. Bob, any other?
Witness to Innocence.
Take it out? Yeah.
Witness to Innocence and Journey of Hope.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Oh, you can take it out of there?
I brought this up because out on the table is a paper that has very important two sides. One is a piece written by Reverend Jack Sullivan Jr., who is director of the Ohio Council of Churches and also is a family member of a murder victim. His younger sister was killed several years ago. On the other side is one of the answers to your question, that there have been people who are family members of murder victims have worked together to come up with clarity about what would be helpful. And this information is on the other side of that piece. While I'm here, let me just mention, we really would like to stay in touch with you if you're concerned about these things. And you can fill this out wall to wall, or you can just give us your email address and your name, or if a phone number is a better way, whatever way is best for us to be in touch with you so that we can work together to stop the death penalty and to do something real for victims' families. And I'll try to be back by the door when we wrap up, and we're not ready to do that now. There'll be more questions and more responses, but I'll be back there and you can give them to me then.
Well, one thing you can do, just like you said, prosecutors are elected, our representatives are elected. So you can let your representative know you don't want people to kill for you. You know, I mean, we are 3 members of collateral damage of the death penalty, but some of the other people who suffer from the death penalty are those guards that have to walk that poor person that they've been watching over and protecting in their jail cell for how many years, and now they have to sit on the bed and say, what do you want for your last meal? And they don't get paid very much. No. So, you know, there's them too. There's the people who minister to them. So many people who get to know these people. And when you execute somebody, it takes years before that execution takes place. And you're not executing the same person that committed that crime. We all have the ability to change. We all have the ability and should be allowed for redemption. And if we kill them, we take away that opportunity. Any other questions?
Got it a wrap.
It's a heavy stuff.
I was just saying that there's sometimes, usually in groups, people that don't want to talk publicly, so we'll be back there if you want to come to us individually and talk or ask a question.
And if y'all can, spread the word that we're traveling in different groups and teams across Ohio. The Journey of Hope tour is still in effect until next week, so tell people and y'all friends about us. Come out and hear these messages of hope and compassion and love. Thank y'all.
I just want to thank you for sharing your sacred stories really with us.
Thank you.
This will continue to be a part of our community and we'll continue to support you. We will also have a video of this so we can share it more widely. So
Thank you.
thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being with us tonight. Please do stay around and chit chat and have some refreshments. Thank you.